one, action.
Thank you, Sia. I cannot wait. This is what I wanted to say officially on camera. I cannot wait till election season is over because I'm tired, sick and tired of sitting with politicians and their lies. No, I'm kidding. But to be honest, I am tired, and because you guys are in campaign season, some of you, I also realize you're in a certain mode. So even if you try to have a conversation like, so how are the kids doing? You're like, Pen, the thing about kids in this country and the way government, you're like, yo. So we can't even have like a lekker chat now about parenting. Sis Vuyiswa, I'm really honored to have you here. I'm really honored that it happened so quickly as well. I sat with Funzi Ngobeni of Action SA, and while I was speaking to him, and immediately after, for some reason, I just had this thing of, I really think I want to sit with Vuyiswa. And I remember first seeing your face. I was going to watch rugby at King Edward School, Cares in Houghton. And I saw your face, premier candidate for Gauteng. I'm like, hey, okay. Uba Manjelo sis, we're getting a new release. But anyways, officially, welcome to Dope Conversations. How are you? How have you been? How are the stress levels? How's the excitement?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure.
It is indeed an honor to be invited to sit in the hot seat.
It's not that hot.
No.
Maybe after a while, no aircon.
And things are definitely heating up on the campaign trail. So I think the next 3 weeks is the final stretch, but it's probably the hardest.
Yeah.
We're firing on all cylinders. We are doing what we call a 6x6, which is like 6 engagements a day, 6 days
serious?
a week minimum. So rest is basically a 4-letter word right now.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I am. I think it's a really exciting time. I mean, like you, I think also I've sat on the other side and wished for election season to end.
Sure.
So that the noise and the clutter and the madness can stop. But I do think there is something in the air this time. There's something exciting. There's a sense of possibility about, and also there's a sense of unknown. Quite frankly, anybody who tells you that they know what happens on the other side of the 29th of May
is lying. Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see what life looks like when we wake up on the 30th of May. Well, already the 1st of June.
Stress levels, how are you balancing family, kids, your tiredness, going up to people frustrating you, people expecting you to have a happy face, and how's that? How are you handling that?
It's, I suppose I've mentally prepared myself for the space and the moment that we're in right now. It's wartime, basically.
Sure.
And so we're fighting the battle, and I don't expect things to be business as usual.
Yeah.
So definitely things are strained. I wish I could be spending more time with my family.
Sure.
But I've also been blessed because I've been running my campaign mostly in Gauteng.
Yeah.
And so, to some extent, I have been able to maintain some level of daily contact.
Not too much traveling outside of the province.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So that helps a lot because at least you can see your kids when they go to school.
Sure.
And then you carry on with your activities for the day. So it's crazy, but it's also what it is.
Yeah.
I think you must accept where you are. One of my favorite sayings actually is that frustration happens in the gap between expectation and reality.
Boom.
Right? So if you can close that gap, if what you expect gets closer to reality, then you have a lot less frustration.
Less frustration.
And that's basically where I am.
I love the fact that you're young. So I did a bit of research, and because we're in election season, I was going to have like a frank chat with you for like an hour, 2 hours if you have. But because we're in election season, I have to write notes and ask related questions. Muchekwane.
Yes.
Muchekwane.
Yes.
Because initially I thought you were an original Ramokgopa, and I wanted to ask, my first question was going to be like, why are you a sellout to the family? But I'm gonna start with this because I did a bit of the research so people can think I'm smart and I do some homework. You've got two, I guess I'd call them umama or sis, I'm not sure of their ages. Marupeni Ramokgopa, who was a minister in the presidency at some point. She's the deputy secretary general in the ANC, and at some point she was the mayor of Sianda district in the Northern Cape. We've got Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa, who is a former mayor of Tshwane, at some point was the Deputy Minister of Health, and is currently the Treasurer General of the ANC. And then very famously, we've got Sputla, Dr. Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, the current Minister of Electricity, who at some point was also Mayor of Tshwane, and Gwen, Dr. Gwen is actually his aunt. So you've got these family members in the ANC deeply entrenched in politics.
Yes.
I actually even found out there's a Ramokgopa village in Limpopo.
Yes.
So now you meet Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, she's the national chairperson of Rise Mzansi. You're like, no man, this one is selling out to the family. She must be called back into the ANC and serve. Ramokgopa is your husband, I'm assuming.
Yes.
How does he feel about the work you're doing? How does he feel about the other Ramokgopas? And what's the secret? Why are the Ramokgopas so deeply entrenched in politics, if you know?
Well, okay, so you've asked a few questions.
My apologies.
So let me start by saying my husband and my entire family at that is actually very supportive of the journey that I'm on and the work that I'm doing. So it hasn't been a point of tension at all or a point of, disruption in any way. And maybe just to clarify even how that relation comes about. So like you've said, our village or homeland is a place called Ramokgopa, which is in Limpopo, and that is where effectively all people called Ramokgopa come from.
It's a beautiful thing, by the way, just to mention. If you could be like Mlochwa, we've got a Mlochwa village that is ours.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So and like Ramokgopa ki dikgosi. So it is their home, and they are essentially the royal family there. So there's a lot of Ramokgopas from different houses and different parts of the family, that some of whom live still in Limpopo, some of whom obviously are based this side.
Sure.
And I think I don't want to say it's a family of a politically sort of immersed family, or whatever the term you used was.
Yeah.
There are also a lot of people who are in business. A lot, actually, of Ramokgopas. My in-laws were professionals. They were in the education sector and are very well known, actually, that side of the world, for being educators and for people who have been involved in community development. And so if you look across the family lineage, you actually see people who are influential, actually, in a lot of different spaces. Politics just so happens to be the one that is most visible to us, and there is a serious alignment of stars right now, that you have so many people with the same surname in the spotlight, But it's definitely, I wouldn't actually even describe the Ramokgopas as a political family per se. I think it is a function of just people who have been active in society and holding prominent roles in society, and I suppose politics does also tend to then attract such people.
People from Limpopo love education, man, because now that you're mentioning it, I found myself getting goosebumps thinking of the investment in education. Vuyiswa is a civil engineer. Before he served, he was also working as a professional.
Yes.
His aunt, Dr. Gwen, I think was a medical doctor as well. I don't know if they have a plan to, but I hope, I'm speaking about your husband and that family, because we can speak about the Muchekwanas as well. I hope at some point they tell the story of their family, their village, the investment in education, and some of the more prominent people they've had. I think just as a beautiful story. We speak about Royal Bafokeng.
Yes.
We speak about the Zulu royal family and Ingonyama Trust, and so we need more and more of these stories.
Absolutely. And I think I know of a few such initiatives that are actually already underway.
Okay.
Batokwa, as they are known collectively, are a very proud bunch of people, and people who, as I said, have been involved in academia and business and such. So there are actually a few people who have already undertaken to write and document the family history. My mother-in-law as well has done a similar exercise. She's not published yet, but I've had an opportunity to read a draft of that book, which basically traces the family history right up until the first kings, and so that's also beautiful in explaining and understanding the various names, the lineages, and how the interconnections happen. It's important as well when you come in as Umakoti, to understand those things,
I'm jealous.
So I'm
so jealous.
It is beautiful. And I think in general, just as a practice, and not just limited to this family, I think that the practice of documenting writing our own stories, telling our own stories, preserving the knowledge that our elders have in society is a really important exercise, and one which we don't do enough.
Yeah.
I see, for example, sorry, I'm digressing a bit.
No,
here,
please feel free. This is the space to digress.
This is the digressing place. Yeah. So I mean, I often just marvel at the conversations that happen online, for example, about traditional marriage and practices and different people's understanding of the practice. You know, some people will say, no, we were never married, we just lobolled, or they came and they we didn't conclude, and then others say, no, but if you had a celebration, then that's when you could. So there's always this different misaligned understanding, and I think a big part of that is that we haven't necessarily hard-coded it anyway. We haven't done the work of writing it down and institutionalizing our cultural knowledge and practices. And so inevitably it becomes prone to some level of dilution or some level of interpretation.
Sure. And erosion over time.
Yeah.
I want to make 2 points before we continue. The first one being, for people that don't know, legally in this country, it doesn't matter how much money you pay. Depends on who's interpreting the law, of course. But when you watch certain legal matters disputing, I know we lost Jabba, WHP, and there was an issue with him and his wife at the time. And these were some of the conversations. And even with Ricky Rick, who we lost as well, and his life partner. Some people will say no matter how much money you pay, it could be 100 Rand of ilobolo, you're married. Some people will say, as long as there's a ceremony, people came, people ate, there was a you're married, because we're not capturing these things. And I know Mzansi is big on family, which I think is very important. Number two, what you're raising is the concept of, I sat with General Bantu Olomis of the UDM, and he spoke about institutional memory, which is one of the
massive thing.
It's one of the controversial points of the transition. Nelson Mandela comes into power in 94, so obviously he must chase away all the white people that are in parliament. It's like, but these people know all the levers and the what and the buttons and the documents, so we kind of need them to do a handover. And I don't think we do a good job of that in this country. From a political point, definitely.
No, we definitely don't.
From a traditional point, I mean, we saw a scramble when the late King Goodwill Zwelithini of the Zulus passed on, and then his wife became the regent, Queen Mantombi, for a short period, and she passed on. Yes. But the son had to be groomed so quickly, and you're like, but did you not know at some point there'll need to be a successor? And even in our own families, to what you're saying, like, do you have a family tree? Do you have a book? I had to compile a list of my father's children because they're not known, like that close to me, and you're like, this is really, really tragic for us. So these are conversations we need to have.
Yeah.
I'd like you to give a shout out to the Muchekwanes. Your name is Vuyiswa, which I'd assume would make you Mxhosa. So I'm not sure. Muchekwanes, from where are you from, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's actually a great starting point. I think my names collectively tell quite a story about both my family's diversity, but I think our country's diversity.
Sure.
My first name is Vuyiswa, obviously. My second name, Kiri Dumezi, which is a Setswana name. Muchekwane is a Chivenda surname.
Jeez.
So my father's family and my extended family are from Venda, from Chakuma, actually. And yeah, I've grown up in that space. And Vuyiswa actually came from my paternal grandmother, who was Xhosa.
Beautiful.
So
paternal meaning your father's
father's mother
is from the Eastern Cape?
No. So my father's mother was Xhosa.
Oh, I hear you.
And so I'm actually third generation Gauteng born and bred.
I hear you. You're a mixed breed, but it's difficult to see you guys as mixed breeds because you're not mixed race like about
exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, and I think, but this is actually an interesting point because it's actually the product of, you know, the lineage and being based and born in Gauteng. I think this is what happens over time. So, I mean, my mom, both my parents were born here.
Yeah.
Both my grandmothers were also born in Gauteng. One was born in Boksburg, actually. The other one was born in Yeoville. in like the early 1900s.
Hectic.
Yeah.
Early 1900s.
1924.
Hectic.
My grandmother was born in Boksburg.
Okay.
And obviously subsequently when the forced removals happened, on my father's side, they were moved from Boksburg to Davidton. And so that's where my father grew up. On my mother's side, they were moved from Sophia Town to Meadowlands, Zone 1. And so that's where my mother grew up. And that's where I spent a lot of my life between those two places. I was born in Hillbrow, in the CBD.
Jeez.
At the time, it was not the grimy streets of Hillbrow.
Yeah, I've heard. And I've seen the pictures.
So it was a very different place then. But, I think that my names tell a story. My names also, my father's family who are from Venda, because my grandfather kind of, wasn't part of his life and didn't raise his children. So they grew up speaking Xhosa, not necessarily connected to the Venda side of the family. And in fact, it was so amazing for me to now finally connect with that side of the family. And this was recently. I mean, this was like just 5-6 years ago, where I went to Venda properly for the first time to go and meet Omakadzi and all of my cousins and connect with that side of the family. And it was beautiful. So I think that I am like the South African flag, basically. I've got a mix of everything in there.
It's like a pilgrimage. I believe there is a fund, I stand to be corrected, from Israel, that allows all Israeli or kids that are linked to Israel around the world to get a free trip from anywhere they are in the world to visit Israel.
Okay, yeah.
I think something like that would be beautiful on a smaller scale, depending on where your family's from. It doesn't have to be like some traditional fund. It can be your own family, to be like, we always make sure that you guys in Joburg or in Durban or in Cape Town, when you turn 18 or at some point, you have to go to where we come from and just see that this is where, and then you go through like a history lesson of your grandfather lived here.
Yes.
These are the grave sites, because we lose a lot of that. And that's probably part of the institutional memory, where maybe you take videos, you write a story, and, you document.
It's actually so funny that, because I remember when I was growing up and people would say like, where are you from?
Yeah.
And then I would say, I'm from Joburg. And
it's
they'd
like,
be like,
nah.
Yeah, but like,
where's
home?
Yeah.
And then you have to like explain, home is right here. Home,
sure.
Who is home, actually, is the question. Who is home? If home is my mother, then like...
wherever my mom is.
Home is where my mom is. If my mom is in the northern suburbs, that's home.
Yeah.
If my mom is in Soweto, that's home. And so that whole question used to cause me a lot of anxiety for this very reason.
Yeah.
So home is definitely Joburg for me. I think it's important that I am able to jump in and out and connect to my relatives from other places.
Sure.
I mean, my mother's extended family comes from Hillbron, Hebron, or depending who's saying it.
Sure.
Hailbron. So Kibatswana, and it's a whole other side of the family.
Sure.
And so I think it's great. It gives one a perspective of life and also of identity that I think is much needed at a time like this.
I want to close this chat. Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh has got a white British mom and a black Xhosa dad. I think the politically correct term for people like him is he's mixed race, and not necessarily colored.
Yeah.
Because Warwick Stock was like, he's not colored, and colored's got so angry, and he's like, bro, I didn't grow up in the culture.
Yeah.
He identifies as Zulu.
Okay.
Even though he's mixed race.
Waras.
Waras.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, Sizwe went through the initiation as Umxhosa after he finished at St. John's. I don't know how important this is for you, patriarchy versus whatever. What do you identify as, since you're a mixed breed yourself? Do you identify as the husband, the family you married into? Do you mix, or are you just like, I'm just a South African?
No, I think I own all the identities.
Yeah.
Because the story of Vuyiswa is incomplete without an acknowledgement of all the identities.
Sure.
And I don't feel under pressure to pick a lane.
If there was a box, a tribal box, you would not tick. You would tick other.
All.
You tick all. Dope.
I would tick all, yeah. And I'm glad we don't have that box, by the way, because I think we're just Africans.
It's complicated. It gets very complicated when you go into the history.
Yeah.
I want to do a profile. I hope you don't mind. So you are Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, the chairperson of Rise Mzansi. And I've got a question about that. I think that might be my first question. You're an experienced entrepreneur and a business leader with over 15 years of experience across various industries, including retail, marketing and design, events management, and property investment. You've also held various listed, private, and non-profit board roles, and you hold a BCom in politics, philosophy, and economics, which is a PPE from UCT, and have completed executive programs with Gibbs Business School and Oxford University. At some point, you were the CEO of the South African Institute of Black Property Practitioners. Then you became the chairperson of the National Property Practitioners Council. At some point, you were the member of the Black Business Council, BBC, and you were a member of the BRICS Women's Business Alliance Executive Committee. And then there's a bunch of awards, which I think for completeness, I'll read them. I hope you're not one of those people that blush and, I don't like compliments.
I'll sip my coffee.
So you're an alumnus of the 2018 Fortune 500 Vital Voices, which is a US global mentoring program, and a recipient of the 2011 Destiny Magazine Top 40 Under 40, 2018 Young Independence Top 100, 2018 CNBC Africa All Africa Business Leaders Award finalist, and a finalist in the 2019 Standard Bank Top Women in Business. Why? Why, oh why would you come into the messy, dirty, pig-infested world of politics and not carry on being a shining star in business and do all the right things there? Why would you come back? Not even come back. Why would you come here and not carry on with this brilliant profile?
Because I think we are not brought to this earth just to, for self-aggrandizement, to just grow ourselves, acquire wealth or accumulate wealth, and just be and then leave. And I've always known somewhere in me that I need to, I've always been a person who follows my purpose and who is very much driven by a why, the question of why. Why am I doing this? Is this the most important thing that I could be doing with my time right now, et cetera, et cetera. And I just feel like it's not enough to just show up, make money, spend money, go on holidays, put your kids in private school and leave, particularly in a country like ours, where the rest of the house is literally burning.
Yeah.
And it's impossible, I think, in good conscience, if you have a conscience and you have a genuine love of people and our people, to imagine that you could just comfortably live your life and not be bothered by what's going on here. So I've always been bothered by South Africa's state of being, even during the good days. When I finished varsity, we were actually in a very good space. It was 2006. The economy was growing nicely. We had an upstanding president that everybody was proud of.
Who was upstanding? Mr. Thabo Mbeki.
Yeah,
yes, man. You like Thabo?
Well, I thought he had the decorum, of a president, and we could still hold our heads up high and say we are led to some extent. Whether you agreed with the policies or not is a different story.
Sure.
But there was a decorum about the leadership there, and I remember even in thinking about what I wanted to study, they came to school to do these career awareness things.
Where was school? Sorry.
Here in Joburg. I went to Crawford.
Crawford.
Well, I finished at Crawford. Yeah.
Jeez, siyabonga abazali.
I actually was I got a bursary to attend.
Shout out to abazali and shout out to you as well.
Yeah.
But we also have to give credit to abazali, but definitely to you.
No, absolutely. And education has been one thing that my family and my mother in particular has never compromised about.
Sure. Congrats, by the way. I just want to say Crawford is a really top private school chain in this country.
Yeah. I suppose congrats to them.
No, congrats to you for getting onto the platform.
Oh, okay.
I think people like you, I'm sorry to deviate a bit. I've got mixed feelings about private schools, especially the top ones, and I apologize. But what tends to happen and what they're good at is the ability to identify talent. So people like you, even if maybe you weren't paying full or partial fees for what you become later on, they end up using you as a poster for, Vuyiswa was at Crawford. But it is a massive platform. So I just want to say shout out to you for getting onto that platform.
No, thank you. And you're absolutely right, by the way, because I am now a parent of a 12-year-old. And I've been looking for high schools and thinking about high schools. And there are schools that I have just disqualified because I've met boys from there.
Jeez.
And I don't like those guys. And so my child is not going there.
I want to defend those schools. I think I know the schools you talk about. No, but we'll leave them.
Leave them.
So UCT comes, career day.
Yeah, so not even UCT, high school.
Sure.
And the one question,
Or different institutions are coming.
It was more like a career guidance organized by the school. So then they asked sort of, the question was, think about somebody that you admire a lot. And so when you've decided who that person is, go and find out what they studied or what career they're doing, and then work backwards from there, just as a starting point. Of course, that's not foolproof, but my person at that time was Thabo Mbeki.
Yeah.
And I thought I really admired his manner of leading the country, and then I discovered what he had studied, and I thought, well, that's interesting. Let's find out more, and that's how I ended up doing the PPE.
That's dope. I think that's important, just as a teachable moment for anyone that's gonna watch this. Your kid is confused, especially when they have to pick subjects, grade 10, 11, 12. If you don't know, write a list of maybe 5 people you admire.
Yeah.
Maybe not Beyonce and Chris Brown.
And Peña.
Maybe not Peña. Find 5 people that you admire who are professionals in some way, because this is for studying purposes.
Yes.
And just go find out what they studied. I know a lot of wealthy people around the world and in this country. A lot of them studied law.
Yeah.
From a Patrice Motsepe to a Christo
law
Visa
was
to law was a big thing.
You wanted to do at that time. Yeah.
At some point, chartered accountants as well became captains of industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think that's a really dope teachable moment.
Yeah, and so that already kind of set me on a path.
Yeah.
But it also, I also often say that I didn't study necessarily with a job in mind. I studied the thing that I felt I could remain engaged with for the next 4 years. And it had to be something that I was really interested in.
Sure.
And so that kind of led me down that path. But the reality is that when I finished, as I'm saying, things were overall quite good.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of opportunities in the market. And I made a decision that, no, I'm not going to go. I don't want to work in government because I couldn't see myself like being like a public official in government, even though I felt I did want to serve my country in a way. But the political culture at the time was just not one that I felt was conducive to somebody like myself.
Sure.
And I've also got this entrepreneurial streak. I've always been a person who wants to start my own businesses, make my own decisions, etc. And so that was also pulling me in that direction. And that's basically then the route that I took.
Sure.
And went and started. I went into retail. I did a trainee program with Edcon, and I trained to be a buyer. Which was great because then one got to travel a little bit, see the world a bit on the company's dime, and then acquire as much knowledge as I could, contacts, etc. And then 2 years later, I then quit, cashed in my little pension fund that I had, which was like the most money I'd ever looked at one time. And I think it wasn't even that much. It was like probably 120,000.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot when you're 22 years old.
No, when you're 22, it's everything.
Yeah,
you're like, I'm so rich.
I felt like a millionaire, but I soon found out that when you are about to open your own clothing store and you need to pay your own bills, and 120 doesn't really go that far. So that's then how I started my own, my first business when I was 23. It was actually a clothing store in Braamfontein.
That's dope.
In Juta Street.
That's dope.
And it was like right at the time when, the whole city was regenerating and there was a lot of excitement and investment into the city.
What year was this?
2009.
Okay.
I don't know where you were at that time.
I got to Joburg 2008. I'm older than you, Vuyiswa. No, I'm actually 1 year younger than you. We're not going to expose your age. I was at Rhodes in the Eastern Cape before, and then I came to do my honors in accounting in 2008.
Okay.
So I've been in Joburg since 2008. So
So
2009,
you arrived in
I was around
prime
there.
time. So you used to go to all those places.
No,
there,
the
sure.
city was preparing for my arrival.
Oh,
So yes,
okay.
yes,
Hey.
yes.
So maybe we even might have bumped into each other.
Maybe.
At some point.
Maybe.
But yeah. So I had a clothing store there in Braamfontein, and it was just a great time to to be running a business.
Yeah.
The business, we kept it open for 2 years. And then at some point just ran into some cash flow challenges. But it was also around the time when I had my first child.
Sure.
So, when you're running a shop, it's the same thing as like running a restaurant. You've got to be there.
Sure.
Like every day.
Sure.
You're the one who opens the shop, you're the one who closes it. You are counting stock, you are mopping the floors when floors need to be mopped. And so, 2011, for me, it was like, okay, I need to realign my priorities. I have a new baby. There's no maternity leave when you're running your own business. Sure. And so I made the decision to close the shop at the time. It was sad. It was very heartbreaking because I'd put my everything into it. But it was okay. It opened up another new chapter and,
A really great story, man. And these are some of my favorite stories as someone who was in entrepreneurship as well. I want to make a point that you eventually did kind of go back to your why, which was Thabo Mbeki, because now you're back in politics.
Oh.
Very importantly. Would you want to be a president of this country? Like him?
So, look, I can't say that's not necessarily what drives me.
Sure.
That's not what wakes me up every
Sure.
morning. I think there's a lot of things. Are you asking me if I want to be a president or if I want to be president like him? Firstly, let me double check.
So you were asked in school who you admire.
Yes.
And you felt he was a great leader.
Yes, yeah.
Not necessarily his title. I want to be Oprah.
That's
You're like,
exactly-
look, I like the work they do. I like the way they move. I like
Yes.
their...
So that's exactly...
in that. I'm asking in that context if you'd
Okay.
want to be like the supreme leader of this country.
Okay, so that wasn't really the reasoning behind it.
Sure.
I think what I admired in him was the leadership qualities.
Yeah.
And, I suppose also the space in which that was happening. So in a way, I suppose I'm living my dream right now. I'm not the supreme leader of the country, but I'm in an organization that gives me the ability to grow and develop as a leader, but also to instill a certain culture into our politics, into leadership. And in many ways, certainly after the 1st of June, we will also have an opportunity to define, the trajectory of this country. We'll be writing legislation, we'll be voting on things, we will be determining the trajectory of this country. And so that really excites me.
That's so dope. One of the things I hope you guys and whoever the future leadership will do is we shouldn't have to start businesses or be involved in businesses after varsity or later. It's one of the things I admire a lot about the Indian community, and I think parts of the Jewish community as well. Because that thing you're learning about cash flow, customer service, if you have employees, employee management, recruitment, firing, some of these kids learn these things from primary school, working behind the till, watching their father hire, their mom fire. Those are some of the things I hope future generations will do. And we're still not getting it right. It's cute to have a cake sale on a Friday. Please buy my cake. But that's like a very, very small entry drug to the game. The real game is if mom, dad has got a business, go work there on weekends and go figure this thing out. I hope it's something we're going to get right.
So you say that, but I think what also comes out of that, besides just the technical knowledge, is observing the reality.
Correct.
The work ethic, the sacrifice, the fact that it isn't glamorous.
Sure.
20 years later, maybe you've got Pick and Pay, but at some point it was a spaza shop.
Sure.
And we tend to look down on the small things and the small beginnings because we've often missed the story in between and not had an opportunity to see that. My mom was self-employed. She started her own company in 1995. She was actually working in the advertising industry and had quite a senior role in the advertising industry as an African woman at that time.
That's dope.
And she left that space to start her own business with very little, And I have had the opportunity to have a front row seat to seeing what it takes to successfully keep a business afloat for effectively 30 years.
Yeah.
She's still running it, by the way. She's in her 70s.
Yo, shout out to your mom, man.
Yeah, and
Jeez.
it's still going. And I think anyone who's in the ad industry probably knows who she is, because they've worked with her in some way. But, she's the person who we would go to sleep at night with her sitting at her computer working, and wake up in the morning and find her still there, bent over, writing some scripts or proofreading some things because there's an ad that needs to go out tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And that work ethic and that, just the consistency, I think is something that I've really taken away from her in everything that I do. And she's a raging perfectionist as well, which I think has helped her to also outdo the many competitors that have come over the years, and I think we underestimate those small things. You don't have to be the biggest, the most well-funded, the this and that and that. You need to understand your space. You need to understand what your value proposition is, and then you need to drum it consistently. I think consistency actually wins the race in the end.
Geez, that's brilliant. What is a national chairperson of a party? Because I think of it from a business perspective, and it makes me want to ask, is Rise Mzansi your political party? Did you found it? What is a national chairperson of a party?
So I think I'll define it, but then I'll also just talk about sort of where we are.
Sure.
So actually, let me start there. So Rise is obviously a startup for all intents and purposes. And it's actually wild because we are running an election campaign and contesting a national election whilst having the same issues and frustrations that any other startup would be having anyway.
Yeah.
And they would be doing that. So it's kind of like starting up and going public.
Yeah, I hear you're opening a spaza shop and you're trying to list on the JSE at the same time.
At the same time. That's exactly what we're doing right now. And so the national chairperson is effectively like the political CEO of the organization, in that they are responsible for the organizational kind of oversight.
Sure.
That includes governance, it includes ensuring that the political leadership is managed and organized effectively. Meetings that are set up need to be set up. In our particular instance, because we were starting up, everything from kind of writing a constitution, deciding what structures and institutions need to exist to deliver the type of politics and organization that we want, was very much part of what we spent a lot of last year doing. Now, I suppose it's very much about thinking ahead and how the organization needs to be structured to enable us to govern when we get there. So that's the thinking, that's where we are right now. And just organogrammically, I just made up a word. Organogrammically.
Ooh, shame.
We actually have our national leader, Songezo, who is the leader of the organization. And I would say, if you define that, he's the political head of the organization. He's the chief fundraiser of the organization. He's the face of the organization. Everybody effectively reports to Songs. But then...
including yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm saying under that, you then have what we call the National Leadership Collective.
Okay.
And all of us as a collective then have different roles. And the NLC effectively kind of... I convene the NLC in our meetings, and I chair those meetings. So it's a role that evolves also depending on what stage we are in and what is mostly required at that time. And I think it differs also in different organizations.
I can imagine.
Because another thing about Rise is we don't have like an SG. We just don't have that role.
Yeah.
So we've taken what would have been an SG's role and we've split it out between kind of our chief organizer. Some of it sits on my desk as chairperson, and so on and so forth. So we've just thought differently about how we want to be structured, and so some of those responsibilities that would sit with an SG, the secretariat duties, and making sure that kind of function of the organization is taken care of, would sit on my desk. Whereas, the more kind of the groundwork and setting up structures and making sure all of that is happening sits on the organizer's desk.
Okay. I wanted to ask this question. So you guys don't have an SG. You don't have a Fikile Mbalula.
Oh, thank goodness.
I was hey. I was gonna ask if you're like the Helen Ziller and if Usonges was the John Steenhuisen. But you've explained that your structures are different.
Very different, yeah.
I've written a list of ladies here. And it's something that's, I don't know if it's a concern. So I'm very big on family. And I'm also very big on the unity of men and women.
Yeah.
I believe there are agendas out there to divide us. And we need to fight those agendas. With that being said, we come from a history of patriarchy and the oppression of women. And I've been saddened by how women have been sidelined, I think is the word I'll use, when it comes to politics. The ANC had an opportunity to have their first female president, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. At some point, I thought Lindiwe Sisulu would rise up. Some people are liking Naledi Pandor now. But it seems like politics is still very much a male-dominated. So one of the reasons I asked about Rise was because I wanted to ask is it your party, Patusongezo, as the man has to be the face? It's a question I'm planning to ask Usisi Unobuntu Hlazo Webster of Bossa Bold One South Africa, where Musi Maimani is the face. But she's one of the co-founders, very capable, competent, strong figure. They've added Ayanda Ali at Bossa. I'm trying to think. Let me go through my list. You've got from the DA, you had Lindiwe Mazibuko, who was pretty great. You had Phumzile Van Dam, who's left. In the ANC, I don't know what her career plan is, but Thuthukile Zuma, who is the daughter of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and Jacob Zuma as well. You've got a new player now in MK, being Duduzile Zuma Sambudla. Patricia DeLille is a veteran. Umamu Balega Mbete is a veteran. May she rest in peace. We had Umamu Zanele Magwaza Msibi, who was under the IFP and then created the NFP, which became a great contender. We've had Umamu Tandi Modise, Togo Didiza. We had at the time, I think she was acting deputy president, Umamu Phumzile Mlambo Ncuga. And even though she may not have played that role, but I'll add Umama Uwini Madikizela Mandela. Can we not have a strong political party that is fully led and run by women in this country, considering what a huge role women play? Because some of us, I'll speak for myself, some of us are tired of just, when you look at the elections, it's just a bunch of men.
Yeah.
Maybe Patricia DeLille might be a bit of a, and at some point Helen Ziller. But for the rest, it's like, even when there's a strong woman, there needs to be some man next to her.
Yeah.
And women can't come together. Like, let's say you, Nobuntu, Ayanda Ali, and other women saying, guys, we love men, we're willing to work together with men, but for the purpose of history and what's important, we'd like to just create a political party just first for women. Just to show that we're capable and competent, kind of, and so that young girls out there can know that you don't need to necessarily work with men and be in the shadows. Just your thoughts around that.
So, again, you've said a lot.
I apologize.
I think there's a few things in there to unpack. The one being the many incredible women that you've named.
And there's a lot more, sorry.
Yeah, there's many more.
Yeah.
I think that, in fact, politically, South Africa is actually far advanced, even in relation to some of our developed country counterparts, in the way women are represented and hold positions of power, either at cabinet minister level, as legislators in parliament, etc., etc. Is that enough? No, of course not. And there is absolutely no, let me say, ideological reason why women should not hold number one spots. But there are structural reasons, I think, why we find ourselves here. And we tend to have discussions only about that number one spot.
Yeah.
Without acknowledging everything else that's happening in our society. What does it take to make a president? What does it take?
Or what should it take?
Or what does it take?
Not $1 billion.
Forget even a president.
What should it take?
What does it take to make a top 5 political party?
Yeah.
Because there have been parties in this country that have been run by women that did not get votes. There was a party, the one you want, yeah, women, what. There was one called Women Forward.
Jeez.
Before. They contested the previous elections, I think 2019. They had the same thesis as you. And yet today, many people don't even know their name.
I forgot to mention Dr.
And I'm not saying that. Yes,
Mampela Rampele.
of course.
And Umama Ayanda Dlodlo before she shouted
Correct.
me. Sorry.
I'm getting there. And then you had, Dr. Mampela Rampela, of course, who was also a woman running a party, being the face of a party. You have now the likes of Sarah and so on and so forth.
Yes,
so
Colleen Makubele.
you have...
My apologies as well.
It's not that they don't exist, right? So I think we can dispel that notion.
Sure.
But what is then happening all around us? So one, particularly in politics, you have, let me start with just the world of business. JSE, for example, where you still have today less than 10% women ownership of the JSE. So where is capital, which is sort of true power and influence, sitting in this country, globally for that matter? Women own less than 10% of land, even globally, not here, not just here, globally. And assets on the JSE. If you look at the religious sector, it is a fairly new thing, and we know the intersection between politics and religion. It's a fairly recent thing that women are holding positions of significant influence and being body bishop and archbishops and all these things in churches. And you could look at that across the board. Traditional leadership. To what extent do we have women in positions of power in traditional leadership? And we know what a massive constituency that is in terms of galvanizing society and leaders emerging. Now, I'm saying this because I'm saying we cannot superimpose our fantasies on the world that we live in. We do live in a society that is still quite patriarchal in its power structures and in how it is organized. We do live in a society that is relatively traditional and conservative. So there are also we're still navigating our understanding of women and the roles that they can and or should be playing in society. And all of that has an impact in what you end up seeing, the final product at the top. Now, I do think, to come to your other question, is that us as Rise Mzansi, internally, I can comfortably say we don't have that issue internally. So internally, the party essentially was a product of a number of people who came around the table and said, we have a problem in our country, we need to fix that problem. And we've made some very specific decisions to ensure gender equality, not just in numbers, but in substance.
Correct.
And in the politics
very important.
and the culture of the organization, right? So Songezo, who was chairperson of Rivonia Circle, and he then made the decision to catalyze the beginning of Rise Mzansi and galvanized a lot of us around the table. And we genuinely felt he was the best person to be the national leader. And I think
on merit.
On merit. And he has proven himself. He's an incredible leader. And he's actually managed, his leadership style is such that women, many of us around the table, have been given and are able to sort of define this organization in a way that makes it a space for women, and that truly harnesses the talents of women and the abilities of women. And so even myself as national chair, I don't think it's tokenistic.
Sure.
That was my experience. I had experienced, chairing boards and chairing committees and things before. I had come in with a certain level of leadership experience, and I was able to do the job, and that's how I got the job. Not because we decided we need this and we need, no.
We need to tick a box.
But there was one particular decision that we did take, and that was the decision not to have a women's league. We said to ourselves, okay, if we're going to have a women's league and a youth league, the other side, the underlying message that we send is that the organization itself
Yes.
is the men's league.
Correct. Old men's league.
Yeah. So
if you're young, now
if you're
youth
young,
league.
go
If you're a
there.
woman, there's
If
the
you're a
women's
woman,
league.
go there. So the organization itself is a men's league. And we said, no, we're not going to other
It is
women
implied. You're very right.
at this table. That's
It's
the
implied.
implication.
I want to lead. You're like, yo, but you're youth. Go there.
Go there. And so we're very clear that we create a space of equal conversation and equal opportunity at the main table. So in our National Leadership Collective, we have 21-year-olds, we've got a 70-year-old. We've got a balance of women and men. We have people of different races. We're not cherry picking. So
Sure.
you're not going to have it mapped out demographically to the South African demographics. But we've got, I think, a very fair representation of our society. And we've really tried to create a space that gives equal opportunity to everyone.
Yeah.
And again, you don't legislate that. You build that into the culture, the norms, the standards. And
Yeah.
I want to give you a very good example. And something that we discovered, in fact, as we were doing town halls, community meetings, and things like that. So when you convene a group of people, large group of people, let's say 30 to 50 people, and you open up the floor for questions or comments, generally the first movers in those conversations will be men, generally. Especially if you set the room up with kind of like rows of seats and then the authority figures on the other end. What we observed was that generally the women in the room would wait to see some questions coming. They kind of wanted to test the temperature. And then after maybe 5 or 6 questions or so, one would raise a hand. Or if you picked a woman, then she'd pick. So we had to think about that. And we said, how do we create a space and a political space and a political conversation that is inviting, you know, and actually speaks to women and makes it a comfortable space for women to express themselves about the things that really matter to them.
Sure.
So we set our spaces up differently. We usually set up our spaces in a circular format, for one. So we don't do like the table there, or we are sitting on the stage,
Sure.
siyangena si leadership, and then everybody else is there. Because already that creates like
All protocol observed.
intimidation, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not always a perfect science, but I'm saying when we have the ability to curate a space, that is generally things we have to think about. We create that space. We created a space, for example, that you're able to bring children to. So
That's new.
you have to think about the comfort levels of children
That's new.
in political spaces. So it can't be a space where it's aggressive, siyadubulana. It has to be a space that feels comfortable and accessible for women. And as a result, the majority of our organizers, our volunteers and activists within Rise Mzansi are women. And ourselves, even as women leaders, we have voice, we have agency, and we have the ability to define the agenda, not there in a women's league, in the main table, in the main political conversations. And you see that reflected, I think, very much in our policies. We talk a lot about the textural things that affect the quality of life of women, not to the exclusion of men, but to demonstrate an understanding of the lived experience of many, many millions, in fact 50% of this population, which often doesn't get seen and expressed in political documents in the way that, you know, we are used to experiencing politics. And I think that in itself, as a very minor tweak, as a culture shift, creates a pipeline and a space for women to say, I see myself in this thing. I want to get into it. I actually want to contest for leadership in it. And when I rise and I make it into leadership, I can be assured that, you know, my voice will matter and it'll be heard and I'll be able to actually make a difference in this organization. And I think that's what I know this is what we are building. And we're not going to necessarily see the dividends now, but I think the next elections, maybe even the elections after, you will see even more women now in our national leadership, and who knows what the future holds.
You're making me think of something that I'd never thought of before, that whenever there are gatherings, whether it's town hall, imbizo, likhotla, you may not have women representation, and it may purely be because they have to look after their kids.
Yeah.
I wanted to go, but who's going to watch the kids? And if you're creating a space that is child-friendly, it's like you can come with the kids there.
Yes.
A personal question, I apologize. How do you balance being a mother of 3 and also doing the work you're doing, specifically as a woman, where we assume
Sure.
children are the responsibility of umama? How do you balance it? Because I can imagine many other women who being like, yo, if it wasn't for my kids, I'd also join politics. So you're like, oh, I've got kids. This is how I do it.
No, absolutely. I honestly could not be doing what I'm doing right now if I didn't have the husband that I have.
Yeah.
He is a king amongst men.
Yeah.
But besides that, he honestly, carries his share of the parenting and more, and is as committed, I think, to this journey as I am. So there's never been a time where I feel like the burden of care is solely mine.
Sure.
He's a very active, involved parent, especially now when I'm away for most of the weekends. There's no stress. I don't have to negotiate my existence with someone who feels that it's my responsibility.
Sure.
But in addition to that, it obviously takes a village as well. So I have domestic help. I have my mother who's also available.
That's dope.
And, it's a group project at this stage. Raising these children is a group project.
I wanted to mention this lady's name. That's what I was searching. Indra Noy.
Yes, from Pepsi, ne?
She used to be the CEO of PepsiCo Global
Yeah.
for 12 years. She's got some of the coolest clips on TikTok, if anyone's interested, speaking about being a leader of such a huge organization and being a woman and being a wife and being a mom.
Yeah.
Great sense of humor, very funny, pokes, speaks about, because this was going to be one of my questions. You've got 3 kids, but then because you're married, you've got 4 kids. How do you manage your 4 children? Because your kids need you, but then your 4th child, the oldest one, is also like, hi, but mama, I miss your cooking and those things, and how you balance that. So I just wanted to mention her name, give her a shout out as well. And for anyone who wants to maybe go research her, the difficulty, I guess, may come when you get called for higher honors. By higher honors, I mean greater responsibility.
Yeah.
So you speak about the privilege of working within Gauteng mostly.
Sure.
But if you have to start traveling around the country, start traveling across the world,
Yeah.
society and the legacies and conservatism are fine with the Cyril Ramaphosa being
Sure.
away from his family forever, Jacob Zuma. But it may become different now when you've got a female leader with table. Manje ingane, ekhaya.
Yeah.
And you're like, but you didn't ask that of Joe Biden. You didn't ask that of Putin. Why me?
Yeah.
No, but you're a woman, Moss, and you must. So it becomes very tricky.
No, absolutely. But I think that is the responsibility that we as women leaders have, is that when we come into these spaces and these roles, to really think about how we use our influence to make it easier for those who may come after.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is exactly what you're talking about. Even when we have events, like when we had our manifesto launch and our convention, we had a designated area for children where we had jumping castles, and we got entertainment in because
That's really
we knew
dope.
that our activists, for them to be able to be there.
You're giving other
They're
parties
gonna
like cheat codes right now. They're
But
going to be like, hey.
I hope I'm giving them.
Eta kids.
No, they must.
Yeah.
They must, because that's how we're going to change things.
And
you
they'll
know?
become future voters because they're like, oh, mom, you always used to go to these RISE events.
Bona,
So
my 2-year-old is very clear where her vote is. Her vote is no secret.
Yes, ma'am.
And she can't read, but the one thing she can read is Rise and Mzansi when she sees it. But that's the thing, and and I think it's up to us, and it's incumbent on us not to just come into a system and then become part of the system. The system must be changed.
Correct.
Because we are in it, and so it's not perfect yet, but I think it is deliberately thinking about those types of things. Interestingly enough, during COVID, during lockdown time, that was such an epiphany. It was like an aha moment for me, because I was the most productive I had ever been in my life during lockdown. And I realized it was because for the first time, I didn't have to exist in two worlds. I didn't have to choose between, am I working, am I momming? It was like this
all integrated,
seamless integration, and I could manage my time accordingly. I could park my laptop for a few hours and go jump on the jumping castle, on the trampoline, and then finish and come back and carry on with my emails and schedule Teams meetings. I had just had a baby at that time, and she was still, I think she was about 2 months old during that time, and I was literally sitting on Teams meetings, breastfeeding on Teams meetings.
With the video, thing
like,
off, of course.
No, the video would be like here.
Oh, that's traumatized. Now Vuyiswa.
Oh, are you shy? You used to also eat those things.
No, not shy. But so Vuyiswa, oh, wow. Okay. Whoa.
No, but so what I'm saying is this.
But that's pretty dope.
That like opened my eyes up to what is possible.
Correct.
For women and women in the economy, if we just think differently about work in general.
My son Luna was also born. Luna? I'm trying to think. My other daughter, when she was born. But I think I had 2 kids born during lockdown. Oh, bobies. And I remember what a huge privilege it was for the moms to be like, who needs maternity leave? Because I'm here with the kids. I'm not missing anything.
Yeah.
And to what you're saying about changing the structure is very important. Because what COVID lockdown taught us, which people had said would never work, is I can carry on working and be at home. It's not that I'm on maternity leave, so I can't do anything.
Exactly.
Or don't have kids, because now it's like, no, I can do some work. It will be different, but we can find a way for me to add value. And I can attend meetings so that you can focus on other things, because I'm already here at home and I'm with kids. So
and it's also accepting the fact that, when the world of work was designed in this way, in the sort of the 9-to-5-ness, being in offices, it's a remnant of an era.
Correct.
In which women were not the primary consideration at that time.
Yeah.
So we've come into a system and a culture of work that was never designed with us in mind.
Sure.
And with the fact that we have to, have so many things going on. But in saying that, I also think, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, is that I also think it's really also about that restoration of family.
Yeah.
And it's about ensuring that women are not solely burdened with childcare.
Yeah.
It should not just be. That's why our creator made it a two-man project, a two-person project. A two-person project, right? Because if we were meant to raise children alone, it would have been like that. And so
I agree.
And so it has to be a shared responsibility in a really substantive way. And it's not just about sending a check. And I'm always very clear about this, that it's about involvement. It's about carrying that burden that enables the whole system to work. And that has been my testimony and what I've experienced and what I would want for others.
I've got to come back to that on behalf of Amachita, but maybe I should not raise it. I fully agree that it's one of the things I don't believe in. I don't like the glorification of single mothers. I think it's not something to glorify. I do champion for present fathers, but more than present fathers, I champion for children that are raised within a village. And if you look at it traditionally, back in the day, a village would be your mom, your sisters, sister wives, if he is that way inclined, to shoulder the responsibility and the nurturing. And today in this Western society we live in, the support becomes a nanny and those kind of things. One of the reasons people really loved Barack Obama was because he brought back the idea of a first family, which had been lost in America. And I think George Bush, even Donald Trump, they didn't have that.
Yeah.
Where you've got a Barack Obama, a Michelle Obama, and the daughters.
Yeah.
I'm raising it in the context of, in South Africa, we don't have that.
Sure, yeah.
As far as I know, where you've got a president and the wife is always there and the kids.
You definitely don't. I complain about that all the time.
Would you include your husband and your kids in your work, like as an intentional leadership style to be like, wherever I go, I'd like to be like, I just want to thank my husband. I'd like him to say something. My daughter wrote a poem. She, and you're like, this is part of what I do. Would you consider something like that?
Well, I don't think it should be performative if
Sure.
that's not your natural inclination.
Sure.
But for me, my family is an integral part of my life. And for those who are observant or those who come to some of our events and activities, they know my family.
Sure.
They know my kids. They know my husband.
It's not about hiding them and being like, no, this is my work. I want to protect my family and keep them private.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, there's always that sort of wanting to be protective over people that you love. But I think part of accepting being a public figure is being willing to share yourself with the world and doing that to whatever extent is comfortable.
Yeah.
So for me, my husband has been an integral part of this journey. He has been behind the scenes and around at every big moment,
It's literally like entrepreneurship. When you marry, date an entrepreneur, you become their assistant,
you do.
runner, messenger, babysitter.
It was actually so sweet. I remember when we had our manifesto launch a couple months ago, and my 2-year-old, they came backstage afterwards, after we got off stage and finished making speeches. And she looked at me and she said, "Mama, I'm so proud of you."
That's so dope.
And I was like, how do you even know that phrase? That's amazing.
Yeah.
But it was like genuinely one of my proudest moments. And just to know that, I've done something to make my 2-year-old proud. That's cool.
Oh, shout out to you, man. And I believe your 2-year-old is a girl?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this legacy that your mom left for you. And now you're kind of passing it on. And that's really beautiful. Speaking about how we look down on women. We have got families who are like the families that built South Africa, or the economy as it were. In particular, the Oppenheimers. And you've had Mary Oppenheimer donate money when they started declaring. And recently we had Rebecca Oppenheimer as well. These are women. And even when people speak about them, they don't reference, I don't think they see them as like having money and power. It's like, on behalf of the Oppenheimer family, who are the men there, like, hey, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa.
Yeah.
Rise Mzansi, this became like your breakthrough track, your breakthrough single. And everyone would now reference, Peda khona abantu abafunda ngo 15 million. These newcomers. Your thoughts on Rebecca Oppenheimer giving you guys 15 million rand and all the narratives that have been spinning around that. What are your thoughts? Because we obviously have to cover this.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think there's a few layers of thoughts. Let me start perhaps with Rebecca herself, who I've never met personally, but who I understand is a philanthropist in general. So she doesn't just fund political parties, she also funds other institutions, I think the African Leadership Institute, and a number of other charitable initiatives that are either looking to develop leadership or deepen democracy. She previously at some point was quite a large funder of the DA because she saw at that time, a decade ago, them as a credible opposition party in the country. They've since abandoned that mission, and so she saw us as the next version of an organization or a party that can actually be a credible opposition or at least grow into one. And so that's really the basis of it. I think it's also important to underscore that the Oppenheimers is not like some homogeneous thing. They all do their own different things. So some of them don't even want to talk to us. They have their own monies, they have their own things. They don't want to talk to us because we don't represent what they are interested in. Rebecca in particular kind of thought, I resonate with this message, I resonate with the type of thing that they're doing, and therefore was willing to support us. The other members of the family support whatever they want to support. And so I think that was also quite interesting that she's kind of made that choice. But to me, it's very in line with many of the other things that she has chosen to support in her philanthropy. And coming back to, I suppose, the elephant in the room, what is the impact on that, on us and our policy and our views?
Obviously, you guys are captured. Obviously, you are puppet of white monopoly capital.
Imagine just thinking doing blacks. Is that possible? No. So I mean, we've been very clear from the onset about our policy orientation. Even sort of social democracy as our core kind of foundation and principles. Our desire for a social market economy, our desire to be an alternative to the ANC, our focus on leadership and restoring leadership. And that is a message that resonates with some and doesn't resonate with others. It resonated with Rebecca, I presume, and with a few other people who have funded us. And that is the basis on that. We don't have any quid pro quo. Now,
I've given you money, therefore you must do this. You have to bash the ANC and
in fact, for people who think 15 million is a lot, we've probably left about 100 million on the table.
Come on.
Because of people who actually did want to influence our policy or who did want to direct us in certain ways. And there have been instances of those moments, the joining of the MPC, for example, the multi-party charter, was an inflection point. We lost a lot of money because we chose not to join the MPC. We chose not to condemn Gaza, we chose to actually take a pro-Gaza stance, and that really cost us.
It upset a lot of people.
Upset a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's a principal issue for us, and effectively we are running a campaign actually on very little. If you look now, people have billboards, fam. People are filling stadiums.
No. People have money.
People have serious money. They've got those jumbo it's not even Corex boards anymore. It's like jumbo mega. Those things cost 1,500 rand a pop.
And if you travel around the country, it's scary.
It's scary how those. So politics costs money. That's the reality. And as a newcomer, it is very difficult to access established and entrenched funding channels. And why would people give you money? Because you're untested. So we welcome the donations that we've received. I hope we can get 10 times more after elections. But it's been hard. It's been really, really hard. And the established parties that we're competing against are working with 10 times more than what we have, both from the undeclared donations they receive and two, even from the state funds that they're able to channel into their activity. We don't have a rand of state funding.
Do you have the amount? I've had two differing opinions. Someone said over 350 million rand a year. Someone said over 1 billion rand a year, because this is something we don't know as ordinary taxpayers.
You mean two?
So this is what I've been told. So the government gives money, taxpayers' money, to political parties that sit in parliament based on what representation you have, of which the ANC therefore gets the lion's share. Absolutely. And this is taxpayers' money saying to the ANC, let's say it's 100 million.
Yeah, it's about 330 million, I think.
Per annum.
Yeah,
that they get given. So if they, let's say half, that's 150, 175 million rand a year to the ANC to go do your thing. And newcomers don't get any of that money.
We don't get a dime.
And these guys obviously voted on this in parliament to be like, oh no, please.
In fact, they recently even put a motion to increase their share of it because times are tough. And
this is something that happens every year.
Yeah, they have an allocation that parties get in general. So this is what we are contending against. And, there's obviously also I think there's a sense of idealism around crowdfunding, crowdsourcing.
So Gogo and their church funds and stokvels.
Let's put our 10 rands together and then there is no, and I can say this with my chest, there is no single political party in this country, in the top 10 political parties, that is funded from crowdfunding. It's not a thing that happens in South Africa. Not even from member dues. I'm sure member dues can support one t-shirt drop.
If you're I know the ANC struggles, and their membership last I checked was 10 rand or 20 rand a year.
Absolutely.
And the members don't even pay that.
Absolutely. So, I think we have to accept that. We have to acknowledge that it costs anywhere from 250 million to 1 billion rand, maybe even more, to run an election campaign.
To challenge in the top 5, you'd say?
Absolutely.
250 to $1 billion to challenge in the top 5.
250 million rand is, I would say, entry level for most established parties that are in the top 5 right now. Minimum.
I wanted to ask about demeaning, and I'll put that as a point so I don't forget. Do you think, this is a personal opinion, do you think some of the parties that joined the MPC, the multi-party charter, the Moonshot Pact, were given money to join and that's why they joined?
Yes.
Considering that you're saying, look, there were certain offers for you guys, so you can only assume that others were probably like, oh, naimali.
Yeah, look, I think there is a narrative, rightfully or wrongfully so, that if you can bring enough of if you can galvanize the opposition and bring them together, they can put up a good enough fight to unseat the ANC. Now, that's flawed on many levels because, the 14 million South Africans that didn't vote in the last election.
Registered?
Yeah.
Sure. Because there's ones that are not even registered.
Yeah, no, we had 26 million registered, of which 14 just didn't show up, right? Or 13 and change didn't show up. And so that base of people are not going to be suddenly re-energized because you took the same old parties and you clubbed them together. There is something that they are looking for that is different from what's on the table.
Sure.
And this is where I'm quite excited that there is now this sort of new type of politics that is emerging in South Africa. And Mzansi, of course, is one of the parties that's leading that, right? But this was our thesis from the start, and we were very clear that we don't understand the logic and the rationale of all of this. But there's this fantasy that if you can take all of the parties and put them together, suddenly their 30% will grow to 50%. I don't know. The numbers.
But it's on behalf of the DA, and I find it very upsetting. I could imagine if I was supporting one of the MPC members who are not the DA, how demeaning it would be, because the DA set this thing up to fight the ANC. But in the same breath goes back later to be like, look, we're willing to go into coalition with the ANC. So it's like we're literally just going to use you guys as voting fodder.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to work with the ANC, you're part of the devil.
Yeah.
But we're willing to work with these guys. And it's
Absolutely.
very upsetting.
I think we've all been exposed. I mean, I'm not here to badmouth anyone.
Sure.
But I think we've all been exposed to the flaws of the leading opposition party. And part of that is just the inability to work constructively and maturely with other parties. And I think that is something that many South Africans desire. They would love to see parties working collaboratively in a constructive way. But that doesn't happen if your only way of working with other parties is to completely dominate them or to take an arrogant posture towards them. And I think, so from where we were sitting, that was just a non-starter for us. We were very clear that we want an opportunity to define our own agenda, to define our politics, to build a base organically, tell our own story without being seen as an umbrella of the DA.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean we would be unwilling to work with the DA at any stage? Of course not.
Sure.
We have to govern in a multi-party democracy. And so
That's
inevitably
correct.
we will find ourselves having to find consensus and reach consensus with a number of people that we may not necessarily agree with ideologically, but what we can agree on is our program of action. And that's really been our take on this.
I'm going to go back to demeaning. Not yet. I want to say thank you. I don't know who I'm thanking on behalf of, because it's quite tricky for us good blacks that speak good English, that went to private schools and ex-Model C, because it almost becomes not seamless, but easier for us to get into certain colonial systems. But I do want to say thank you, because you said something earlier, which is very important, that the political climate at some point wasn't very conducive to people like us. And politics, for whatever reason, was for the loudmouth, broken English, the guy who fails, the violent, willing to push and protest. And it was almost like some of us were excluded. And I want to thank Rise. Maybe I'll add Abo Musi and Bossa. Maybe I'll add Ubaba Herman Mashaba in Action, because there's a bunch of the population who are kids that did really well at school, people that do very well in the professional setting, people who want to serve. But when you'd ask them to get into politics, they'd be like, it's like I'm going into the taxi industry. It's not for me. And maybe I'm using the taxi industry as another good example of there are certain industries that we need to remove this thing of it's only for those type of people. So for doing that, I appreciate it. For women, for young, vocal, could add feminists, empowered women who are comfortable even speaking English or their other languages and not feel like, oh, when you only speak English, politics is not for you. Oh, you went to a private school. Your parents, and you're like, no, bro. So serving has to, you know, which is one of the things white people have struggled with. I cannot serve because I'm white. And then for some of us at some point it became I cannot serve because I speak good English and I get along with white people. So thank you for shifting or being part of that shift. I wanted to ask about demeaning. Do you find it demeaning when people are going to see a Rebecca Oppenheimer funding you guys, call you names, puppets, captured? You've got a situation now where Patrice Motsepe has funded the ANC, he's funded the EFF. I'm not sure if he's funded the DA, I stand to be corrected. No one calls him a capturer. No one says to the EFF, you guys are puppets of Motsepe. It's only when there's a white person, male, female, who's rich, who's linked to a certain family. I've seen it happen to me a lot. Some of the money that's come my way, whether because I'm getting paid for work or people donating.
Oh, no, I know, captured.
Oh, I've been. Can you not hear the English? Yay! So let's say I made 100,000 rand. Of that 100,000, I'll get 90,000 from black people. I've worked from people like DJ Sbu, who's maybe given me a bit of money. Kulufelo Maponya, business person from the Maponya family. My own mother's probably given a chunk of that money in various ways over the years. My brother, my sister, people that buy my books, like black people. And then this white person, Jonathan Oppenheimer, or I'll use Rob Hersoff because he normally gets linked, donates 10,000, and that's the headline now. Penal is captured. It's an inferiority complex that we've inherited. Do you not find it demeaning after all the work, never mind politics, that you've put in? When you think of your mom, you know, speak about your husband and maybe his family or the family members we mentioned, where you come from, what your family's been through, your struggles with entrepreneurship, studying at night, going from this to this, raising your kids, and then the first time you become popular maybe to normal people, it's like, oh, you're part of that captured. Do you find it demeaning? And is there something we can teach and tell people regarding this?
So, firstly, I want to thank you as well, by the way, because I think you've created a platform that enables a multitude of voices to be heard and a number of stories to be told, which I think deepens people's understanding of the black experience, the young experience, the entrepreneur's experience. And I think the conversations that we can have at these tables are a lot more humanistic than what we can have on the streets of Twitter or, you know, with our arm's length assumptions of each other. So I think this is actually part of the journey of addressing this very thing that you're referring to. Do I find it demeaning? No, I don't. It's, for me, it falls into the same bracket as terms like being called a coconut, being called a clever black, all those things. I think it says a lot more actually about the people using those terms than it does about me. It says, it tells me a lot about their limited, let me say, perspective and understanding of the world. It assumes that there is, this word dribbles me sometimes, but it assumes that there's a homogeneity in the black experience.
Oh, we saw you kulumi English. What did you say earlier? Aggrandizement. Homogeneity. Okay.
Yeah, which, you know, and Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi talks about the danger of the single story. If we only have one story, we assume everything else that doesn't fall into our perspective or understanding of what a black person should be, a Nigerian person should be, or whatever. It disrupts our perspective, and in fact, it makes you as the individual feel very threatened. And so, for me, that's part of the work that we have to do. That's part of why we're doing this, because we cannot allow a single story to exist.
Sorry, the homogeneity, for those of us who didn't go to Crawford, is basically saying that people being one thing. If you're a black woman, therefore you went to fetch water from the river, therefore you can't wait to have a husband, therefore it's like, no, we actually very diverse.
Absolutely. I mean, it's and I think and it's, and I'm coming back to the being captured part, right?
Sure.
So if your perspective is such that inevitably when there's a white person and a black person, the power dynamic is one of a capturer and a captured.
Sure.
Because a black person cannot possibly
ever
stand on their own 2 feet and hold their own, because you've never seen that, because you've never felt that way, because that's not your experience of the world. Now, you've decided it's impossible for that to be the reality anyway, you know, and I think that's unfortunate that people have grown up in places and have a perspective that hasn't shown them that side of life. I grew up personally and I was raised by black people who had agency.
Come on.
I was raised by black people who worked for their money and who earned their own money and who did not, you know, who weren't reliant on government and this. And I'm saying this is the fact. It's a fact. You know, and that's been my worldview. You know, my grandmother was a nurse. She earned her salary. Until her dying day, she paid her own way. She paid for her children. She paid her own way. She paid for her house. She looked after herself. And so on and so forth. So that's been my worldview. And so I don't have that sense of every time I see an accomplished black person, I doubt the origins of their accomplishment. I am very aware that as African people, we are capable of doing great things. I've seen it, but many people haven't. And I think we must accept that and acknowledge that. And we must also have a conversation which is fair about the state of leadership in our country. Because again, if you just have paid attention for the last 15 years, you imagine now, and you'd be rational to conclude that the only relationship that can be had between a politician and a business person is a corrupt one.
Sure.
You would be very rational to assume that, because the people that we currently have in government are literally, there's no ideological anything keeping them there. It's stomach politics 101, you know? But we have to transcend that. And the only way to transcend that is indeed to have a crop of people who aren't there for that. And I just want to say one additional thing, and this one always cracks me up. It kills me. When people are like, wababona, they are just there to eat. They are coming there to make money. And I'm like, I literally, like, this is the worst, this is the hardest way
to make money. Yeah.
It really is. And
it's because of the incumbents that have created that narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, I could make 5 times more money not doing this. And in fact, myself and even many of my you know, the fellow leaders within Rise have had to make choices and say, we are going to forego other things to be here and to do this work. And I think that is not a concept that is established well in people's minds because of this issue that you've raised, that as professionals, as business people, as people who have other things that they're able to contribute to the economy, we could see politics as a potential place where we come and serve for a period of time and then leave. And carry on with our lives.
Nears my comrade, and then leave. Hey, not live. Leave. African, leave. A long leave. I don't know if we still have time. I have 3 more questions. We're good. Thanks, thanks, KK. I hope you're still fine.
I'm still fine.
Thank you. I think I've got 3 more questions, then I'll release you back to your 6x6. I want to ask, let me just put them on the table. I want to ask about your campaign as Premier. I want to ask Arise versus Arise, and I want to ask why, or would you consider joining the other political parties and the idea of merging? So one at a time, let's start with your thoughts. I think this one I hope will be easy. Your thoughts on the confusion for some people on Rise Mzansi, led by Songezo Zibi, and Arise South Africa by Mpho Gada, of which some people to this day are like, oh, no, this is where Arise. And you're like, ish. Oh, this is the guy from Rise. Ish. No, this is I think the IEC made a flop there somewhere, and someone should have called them to order. And I don't know if it's too late to have some kind of split or.
Well, look, I mean, technically speaking, and the IEC did actually adjudicate on the matter.
Yeah.
Because an objection was raised at the point when we were registered.
Yeah.
They adjudicated on the matter. The names were sufficiently different. I mean, one starts with an A, the other one starts with an R, and the one is Mzansi, the other South Africa. So there was enough for them there.
Yeah.
The other thing was also around the actual logo and likeness, because those are the things that matter on the ballot paper. You know, it would have been quite a different thing if we were next to each other, like EFF and ELF.
There's an EEF I've seen as well.
There's an EEF,
yeah.
and then on top of that, you've got logos that are similar.
Sure.
And so the visual likeness and the names were found to be sufficiently different technically.
Sure.
In the real world, we acknowledge that is something that is potentially going to be an issue. But you also have other issues. I mean, there are people who, will look at my face. Who was a boss? And I'm like, no, just because I'm a woman, now you've decided I'm that woman, you know? Or they'll look at Songezo and ask, is he, you know? And you have to, so I think that...
Oh, black on black racism. All you blacks look the same.
So those things just take time. You know, we've got to build the brand, we've got to establish the brand. And I think over time, these things tend to sort themselves out.
For your sake, I hope so. Because when the ballot comes... we understand that people are not the same, and we're not assuming that people are stupid. We know people have some level of intelligence, but the reality is, I like Usongezo, I like Sis Vuyiswa. When you get to the ballot, Arise is going to be right at the top. Oh, Naba.
Well, they're not on the national ballot, so we won't have that issue.
Sbonga Loco, I guess. Apologies in Portagada for that. Okay. That's the first one. The second one is if you were invited, well, prior to now, because I know you're going to give me a political answer. Prior to now, if you had been invited to Action SA, if you had been invited to BOSA, would you have considered? And maybe within that question, do you see fundamental differences between specifically these three parties? Do you see potential collaboration in the future? Action SA, BOSA, and RISE. This is Herman Mashaba, Musi Maimani, and Songezo Zibi.
Look, I think there is a lot more similarity than there is difference.
Sure.
But there are some fundamental differences. And I think the fundamental differences are actually in the beginnings of the story rather than in the end. And what I mean by that is sort of how we come to be. And I don't want to go into too much detail about the others, but you know, when RISE was formed, it came about as a function of a number of different voices, community organizations, individuals who said, we are not interested in personality politics. We want a ground up people's politics. And so this idea that you need kind of this strongman celebrity face, you know, and that we all need to be now putting our attention towards making one person president was never what RISE was about. And I think we've executed that quite well in having a real fragmentation and disbursement of our leadership.
You guys have a team, which I see doesn't exist with certain parties. Maybe not so much the big ones, but the big ones do have personalities.
Yeah.
But some of the newer parties, you're like, hey, Baba, where's your team? Where are your structures? We only ever see you.
But this is the thing. And for us, in fact, even in understanding and resolving the political problem that we're trying to solve, we felt that South Africa is too concerned with personality politics at this point in time. And if we are going to build a resilient, sustainable organization that is going to be able to scale at the rate that it needs to one day galvanize a majority of society, it cannot be centered around one individual. And that is how we've built this. So as much as we have, you know, Songe as a national leader, myself as national chair, if any of us, I can tell you right now, if any of us dropped dead right now, touch wood.
Is this wood or plastic?
Plastic.
Oh, touch wood.
Yeah, touch wood. Things would keep running.
That's dope.
And we would deliver an election on the 29th
Those are systems. Those are proper structures.
Yeah, and so for us, that's always been the focus. And I don't think, to your point, that we are at odds with each other. I think we all want the same thing, but we've perhaps just had different approaches to achieving that same thing.
Thank you. I think that gives me an answer on potential collaboration and merge. Because it doesn't have to be firm, but it's just like, look, we could comfortably work together because there's more in common than apart. I've spoken to different people. So I spoke about Funzi Ngobeni of Action SA. I sat with Solim Simanga of the Democratic Alliance. I was meant to sit with Chris Papas of the DA, but there was a scheduling clash. Hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to get time to sit with Kenny of PA.
Big time.
Very colorful character. With some of the people that I've sat with, we almost all agree. Almost. I think I sat with Lauren Bernardo as well of the Organic Humanity Movement, OHM. There seems to be a redundancy with provincial structures. And I have to ask you this question
You mean the
because
provincial layer of government?
Because you are running for premier.
Yeah.
Do you agree that there's redundancy? Because some people are like, look, national is fine. Let's focus on local. Or maybe like Usoli said, look, provincial is weak. Let's give them more power. Some people are like, just scrap them and focus on national and local government. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think it's an important conversation to have.
Yeah.
Our kind of broad thinking is that we do need to bring governance and power as close to people as possible.
Yeah.
So, in fact, more than the provincial conversation, we need to have local municipalities and local government a lot more capacitated.
Yeah.
And we need to really come up and resolve the issue of local government funding in particular. So, because that's really where the bulk of governance...
Cold face there with the customer, Baba.
That's where people feel
Yeah.
the effectiveness of a government on a daily basis. So I think the capacitation of local government is very key. What then becomes the role of provincial government? And I am of the mind that at this point, it is a layer of government that is critical, but one that has not actually dispensed of its duties as envisioned
Sure.
In our constitution and in the way our government was designed. So there is a role, for example, for provincial government to play in effectively executing on the cooperative governance mandate. So as a provincial government, I mean, Gauteng has 11 municipalities. It's the smallest province geographically.
It is very tiny.
And so even between municipalities, you could have like a 20-minute drive. In fact, I live like 10 minutes Ekurhuleni there, 10 minutes City of Joburg there, right? So you cannot have fundamentally different governance in those two areas. It's a problem if that's the case. If you've got water here and you don't have water there because one municipality is under administration and the other one is thriving. So the role of province is then to ensure that whatever is being rolled out strategically, whether it's spatial development and urban planning, whether it is service delivery, consistency, governance, just in general, quality of governance, there needs to be that integration across the different municipalities. And I think that becomes a core function of provincial government.
A lot of oversight and just ensuring governance there.
Ensuring
but not to block things, which is in the province.
You see, so that is where I think the challenge arises. The challenge is also in let me say the cookie jar effect, you know. And I think this is the frustration people are referring to, is that so much gets lost in that middle layer because money will get dispersed from national and come to, let's say, provincial housing. There's leakage there. And quite frankly, at local government...
By leakage, you're talking looting.
Yes.
Money getting chowed, because people might be like, oh, it's leaking to local. No.
No, it's leaking into pockets.
Yeah.
And at local government, they're trying to solve for actual urban planning, spatial planning, and they're dishing out development rights. And they're also holding up projects, by the way, because it takes 6 months, sometimes up to 18 months, just to get planning rights over the line to build the housing. So there's this integration issue, and I think there's also a misalignment in terms of how budgets are dispersed. And then there's also just abuse of the system.
Sure.
So you get a situation where you've got one party at province, and they want to show that other party that's governing that municipality. So then they They just cut them off.
We're still waiting. You're like, but the money was cleared. Who told you? Where? Kanjani?
Or they go and fund other nonsense programs in other municipalities because that's where they are in government. They want to look good there. So there's also just an element of like we need overall a better quality of political leadership across the board if we ever want the system to work.
Thank you. That's all I have, I think, for you, especially because we've been speaking for a while. I managed to watch some of your conversations and really brilliant. You guys believe in expropriation. I think you've got a very interesting view on expropriation. I don't know if you'd like to touch on that quickly.
Yeah, so for us, expropriation is, it's really a tool. It's one of the many tools in the toolkit towards enacting spatial justice and spatial transformation.
Sure.
One of the number one items, particularly even in the Gauteng plan, talks about spatial justice and the fact that we can't have an economic conversation or dealing with the remnants of the apartheid era without rethinking and reorganizing our cities and towns. And one of the tools in the toolbox is expropriation. It's just not
expropriation of land.
Yes, of course.
Without compensation.
Let me tell you. In I think 2-3 years ago, the city of Joburg expropriated something like 145 buildings in the city of Joburg.
Jeez.
They did that because the law allows you to. It was under another party's governance. But my point is, it's there. And where there's political will to do it, it can be done.
Yeah.
When they were building the Gautrain, they were expropriating all those lands and properties to be able to build the Gautrain. And compensation was determined, and where the compensation was not market related, then it was fine. They also said, well, guys, this is what we've got, this is what we'll give you. So our sense is that there is an implementation issue here. We don't have to spend the next 6 years revising the law. We need government that is just willing to do its job.
Sure.
And one of the many toolkits is indeed expropriation of land. It must be used. Let's do it.
Spatial justice is an interesting term. I don't know if you are able to simplify it.
Well,
what does it mean? What is spatial justice? So spatial is space.
So
space justice, what's that?
So it's really about bringing effect to equal opportunity through space. So the way our cities have been designed, the way our country was designed, in fact, was in an apartheid kind of mindset whereby, and we know this, there was Group Areas Act, there were certain people who are not allowed to be in certain spaces, etc. And that underpinned the economic system of the time, right? So migrant labor, black people living in homelands, others who live in cities must come in and out with passes, must live in townships. We all know the story.
Sure.
Now, spatial justice, and when we talk about justice broadly as a concept, how do we have a country that is just, that is fair, that has true equal opportunity? Well, one of the ways we do that is to ensure that if you are a poor or a lower income black person, you should not have to use 40 to 60% of your income just to be able to get to work and access a work opportunity. You should not have to, as a child living Kokasi, have to take 2 taxis, at 4 a.m., leave your house at 4 a.m. just to make it to the school gate by 7 a.m. because already you're starting on the back foot. When you sit in the classroom, you're starting on the back foot. And so that's an injustice that is brought about as a function of how our space is organized and obviously the poor public transport system that we have. And so the point is, if we're going to talk about economic justice or, righting the wrongs of the past, we have to look at it in all its dimensions, of which space and how our cities are organized is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Schooling and the access to opportunities that you have by going to a school in a wealthier area, or you will have access to facilities, you will have playgrounds, you will have recreation facilities. I also did a bit of research. I saw that you played rugby at some point.
Come on, boy, let them know.
So you need actual rugby pitch to do that. Now, Kokasi, there's no rugby pitch, and there's no and so it's about saying how do we make living spaces in general where people are more fair, more equitable, such that any child born anywhere has an equal opportunity to be something. And it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be one-to-one, but it should not be the level at which it is at right now. And our rampant inequality is built off of the back of our spatial inequality in South Africa.
It's going to be such a difficult conversation because the first trigger in my head or the first red flag is the taxi industry.
Yeah.
The whole industry is based on apartheid spatial planning, where if black people, of which a lot of them have forced themselves closer to spaces through informal settlements, a big chunk of that industry is maybe going to collapse if it's not integrated correctly, and there may be a lot of pushback as an example, but it's something that we need to do. Ex-President Thabo Mbeki has spoken about a national dialogue. I don't know if that was a unique idea, but I know the UDM and General Bantu Olomisa, that's something that they've also raised. They'd like to have a national dialogue. And when I spoke to him, one of the things I said is I've been saying for years that we need a CODESA 2.0, of which maybe people over the age of 50 are not allowed to attend, and only people that will be hopefully alive within the next 30 years get to sit and recollect history, applaud whatever we need to applaud, borrow whatever worked even from the apartheid government and the British government before, and then be like, we're here now and we want to move into the future, so we want to have a different conversation. And part of them could be things like we want to remove the provinces, or we want to scrap provinces, we want to maybe unite SADC, we want one currency, or whatever it is that whoever's going to be sitting there is going to decide. We're like, we appreciate what you did, but we're here now, and our kids in 30 to 50 years, they'll tell us, you guys messed up, it's our turn. We're like, hey, this is what we could do, but we can't, especially you and I in our age bracket of 20s, 30s, 40s, we can't sit and be like, hey, but CODESA, hey, but you know our elders, like we're the adults, or we're meant to be the adults now, and we also can't rely on old people. It's like, Gogo Mkhulu, you guys are old now, we'll try and take care of you, and you guys can guide us where you can with institutional memory and whatever things we may have blind spots for and your experience, but we are going to make these decisions because we think this is what's best.
No, I'm in complete agreement conceptually with the idea of having a national dialogue. But I also get very challenged with seeing those as genuine conversations when they're happening 3 weeks before an election and people are afraid of losing power.
We need a national dialogue after we get back into government. After you get back.
We should have had it 5 years ago. But in saying that, I do think it is important that such spaces exist. The difficulty that we may find ourselves having is that, who hosts that dialogue? Where does that sit?
Penuel the Black?
Yes!
Pen. No, I'm kidding. But it's going to need to be people...
It has to be
you come from Rise, so I can say this to you. It's going to have to be people with some type of proven track record. Whether it's people that built businesses from scratch, because we have to include as many stakeholders as possible.
Yes.
People that built businesses from scratch, people that have built their own voices, people that maybe are legacy from somewhere, but we must be able to motivate for why you are here.
But you see, this is what I'm saying. So previously you had institutions like NEDLAC, for example, which were spaces where business, labor, what would come together, government. And I'm saying, actually, I think society, we need a more inclusive space.
No, we're going to disrupt. We're on a podcast today. We're on a podcast today.
Podcasters must be there. Must have, and that type of convening needs to happen in a space and be held by an institution or people that are credible. To do that and are unencumbered by interests, which I think they exist.
The interests will always be there. It's tough. I want to give a shout out again to Lauren Bernardo. I do not think they should be a political party. I think I'll say this for a while. I think they should be a non-profit organization, OHM. A lot of the things they stand for are things that I stand for. And I'm raising her because I'm raising her and I'm raising OHM, particularly because of some of the things you've said. Rise has been doing. One of the things you've said is we're not going to wait till we get into government to serve. We're serving now. You've set up food gardens. You've set up soup kitchens. You're trying to help communities solve their problems. You're trying to help communities become stronger, and you believe in things like self-sustenance and doing for self, which is what they stand for. They want to get into government so that they can dissolve political parties and those kind of things. Wow. But yeah, man, I just want to say thank you. And I don't know if you have any closing words You're going to have closing words, and then if possible to see I'm going to ask you to campaign, to speak to the camera there to your people on why they should vote for you as Premier of Gauteng.
Yeah.
But before you do that, I don't know if there's anything else you want to raise or say to me.
Just maybe a closing comment. I did see that you have published your perspective and your intention around the upcoming election.
Oh, my projections.
Not your projections. I think you said who you would be voting for.
Oh, yes, correct.
And I'd like to encourage you to keep your options open until the 29th of May.
Not a problem. And I'm going to be honest. So I said this to Ufunzi. The episode is coming out soon, because whenever this comes out, but it's going to come out soon. And I confessed to him, as I'm confessing to you, that I didn't know who to vote for provincially. And selfishly, I'm sitting with you guys as like an audition.
Yes.
Like, charm me. Vuyiswa, tell me nice things.
Yes.
Swami. So I'm actually very open when it comes to my provincial vote, but I've definitively decided not to vote for the ANC. I may like Ubabu Panyaza Lesufi. I'm not voting for the DA. I do like Usolim Simanga very much as he out. I'm not voting for the EFF. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi is brilliant. Just a brilliant gent on his own and his brand. But I'm not voting for them provincially, nationally, the top three. And I'm looking for people that I feel are doing the work. They're more aligned to me. And this is not so that I can go out and tell people, guys, vote for Rise.
Yeah.
It's for me.
Yeah.
It's who I'm voting for.
No, I'm talking about your vote.
Sure. If the ANC serves you and the EFF, Ntwana, vote for whoever speaks to you. But for me, I wasn't sure.
Sure.
From a national perspective, how I decided to vote, and I don't necessarily have to state who I'm voting for. My brain said we've got 400 seats. And there are people that have seats, and I believe the ANC has too many seats that are deadwood. What Undlozi calls them a sleepist. That come there and sleep and collect a salary, but they're not fundamentally engaging what they're meant to be doing. They're representing constituencies.
So there are
saying,
others that don't even attend.
They don't even attend. People are there, they're not like, look, I'm from Ematati and Newcastle, these are the issues. No, I'm from Limpopo, Ramokgopa, and this is like you're just there to serve your party and to take up space, unfortunately. And I've looked at different political parties, and even when I went through the list of 400, I, as someone who's a little bit politically literate, only know 63 of the 400. I can imagine a lot of South Africans probably know 5 to 10. And out of these seats, I'm like, who do I think would speak up there and say some of the things I think should be said, whether I agree with them or not?
Yeah.
I love what the EFF has done in terms of getting parliament
exciting,
active. People started watching, you know. I voted for them in 2019. I've said this before. They brought in a lot of young people, especially at a time when the ANC was refusing to bring in young people, and they destroyed the ANC Youth League. I was like, because I was an ANC guy before.
Okay.
I was like, they're bringing young people to speak, to bring energy. I like it. From 2019 to now, I'm like, I'm not buying that anymore. And I also think the EFF has got too many seats.
Also?
No, it goes back to the 400 seats, to be honest.
Okay.
The Springboks won the World Cup. I love the story. The Springboks won the World Cup, and many of us know a lot of the players. And when they compete in the world, we believe in them to dominate or win. We don't have a parliament of 400 seats where 100 people, 400, 200, you're like, if these people were to compete in a parliamentary Olympics, I know Vuyiswa, I can't wait till Vuyiswa takes the stand. I can't wait till Ubanbani takes the stand. I would like us to be more intentional about the seats. And again, this is why I like the idea of independence or constituency-based. I'm Vuyiswa, I represent however many people in Gauteng. They know when I go there, I'm going to blaze. I'm representing the Western Cape. You're like, there's our person. And if we don't like you, we recall you.
Absolutely.
And we send some. Now it's party politics, and it's annoying. So the person
you sound like a riser. I'm just saying. Just saying.
Is he a recruit, wala?
I'm just saying.
So the person I'm voting for is someone I know personally. So there's also that bias. It's someone that I kind of know how they've moved in their life, some of their political allegiances in the past, some of the business people they don't like now, who I may or may not like myself.
Yes.
And when they speak, I'm excited. I'm like, I wish I could hear this in Parliament. That's all. That's the only reason. And it's only for that one seat. I don't want their party to get 100 seats, 50 seats. I don't want them to become president. So that was the basis.
Interesting.
It's one of the reasons I've been trying since last year to sit with Usongezo. Rob Hersoff came to the panel show, and he actually, one of the gifts he gave me was Manifesto.
Okay, the book.
By Songez. I haven't read it. Songez, I'm so sorry, bro.
You haven't read
it? I'm so sorry. But I wanted to sit with the Songez also to be like, yo, everyone speak about this guy. I wonder what it is. Rob Hersoff and some of his mates have lost favor with Songez because of what you mentioned earlier. The pro-Gaza, we're here for innocence. They're like, no, be pro-Israel. It's like, hey, Baba, take it easy. We're not here for that. We're here for human rights. We're here for...
Exactly,
And it becomes like the NPC.
Yeah.
Which if I'm not here, then I'm part of the enemy. It's like, hey, Baba, you're not going to force us into... We've got our own values, our own whatever.
Correct.
But Songez was brilliant. I've met you now. You're absolutely brilliant. And I'm only giving you a long answer because the reality is we need as many South Africans as possible to become politically literate.
Yes.
So that when they have to vote or decide or become politically active, they are using their brains and rationality and not their stomachs, which are very important, and not their hearts, and not my father used to favor pirates, therefore my mother was Kaizer Chief. You're like, no, Baba, we're trying to win the league.
Yeah.
So support Sundowns. No. Bad example. We're trying to achieve something, which is for the benefit of everyone and not to monopolize the PSL. Therefore, I will go with these guys because they give the most kids a chance, equal opportunity to become football players.
But
whatever.
what I also love about what you've said is that a vote is not a marriage. You can vote one way in 2019, you can change it in 2024.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's something that you need to be able to reassess at a particular point in time. Do I like that starting lineup?
Yes.
Not just the one guy.
Am I proud of my parliament and be like, yo, those are my people?
Yeah.
Even if they're from different political parties.
Absolutely.
You're like, I like ANC, but yeah, I'm part of the DA, but Peter Groenewald is about to speak. The general is about to speak. May he rest in peace. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, every time he took the mic, would say something spicy, would be tickled.
No,
so
that's good stuff.
That becomes nice.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that. But we'll get there. We're shifting this type of democracy, and we'll keep pushing, and our kids will criticize us, and it's fine, and they'll have their chance. But thank you for asking me. It's one of the things I've criticized politicians on, that the reason certain political parties keep winning, besides visibility and the amount of money and legacy and family members linked, is they go to spaces and they're like, Mama, ngicela usivotele. And for someone, it's like, I will. You didn't ask. You can't just make noise on social media and then I must be like, hey, come ask me and explain to me, Mama Mazos Votela, this is what we're trying to, hey, yes, I really like this girl, Shane.
Trust me, that's the gold standard.
Yeah.
Just looking people in the eye and having human conversations.
And be honest, please vote for us.
Yeah.
Please vote for us.
Yes.
Not, Mama, follow your heart. Vote for us.
You have to be live with that. And if you don't get it.
I hope you have nothing else. The camera's yours. People of Gauteng, this is Vuyiswa.
To the people of Gauteng, we have an opportunity to turn this province around, to usher in a new cohort of leaders who understand what our challenges are, leaders who have experience, and leaders who care, not just for governance, but care for us as a people. And so I am Vuyiswa Ramokgopa. I am raising my hand to be the Gauteng Premier, and I'm hoping that as the people of Gauteng, you will put your trust in me to lead this province going forward, and more importantly, put your trust in Mzansi to take this country into the new generation of political leadership.
Jeez, Sis Vuyiswa, I think you've charmed me so much. I'm going to add a tip, something that just came top of mind. Besides being on the ground, I've realized the importance of being on the ground and branch structures.
Yes.
That is something that you guys are going to have to focus on a lot. I think Action SA is doing a good job as young as they are. Other parties that are not going to invest in that, especially, let's say, parties like the DA who want to make noise but are not visible, are playing games. So visibility on the ground, being there for the people is very important. Unfortunately, you're in a space of popularity, which is annoying because you may find the best leaders in this country may not be the most popular people.
Sure.
But the way to get a seat is to be popular, which sucks. And part of that is going to be when you're on the ground, a lot of African languages, because there are going to be a lot of people that are going to want to support parties like Mzansi. and they just can't hear the English and the homogeneity and the aggrandizement and
I know, the homogeneity for you guys.
Yeah, so simplifying for the people, speaking in their tongues. For some people, it sounds silly. It's like, but this is a good business. You buy my product, you don't need to speak my language. Like, when it comes to politics, people want to hear what you're saying. So those are just my tips for you guys. And I wish you guys nothing but the greatest of success. And I'm looking forward to your political and service career, just from my side.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vuyiswa.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Dango.